Absolutely.
You ready?
Ready.
Go ahead.
Hey, good morning and welcome back. Here we are live at the White Mule Winery on the high plains of Gasconade County. 47 degrees here at air time at the White Mule Winery, and a cloudy day it is. There is some blue sky underneath it, so you know, kind of a mixed ceiling here this morning, but a beautiful day in our neighborhood. And how good has this fall been? And or actually it's starting into winter. Yesterday was the first day of winter. So thus far the cows are all happy. They're still out. Most of those are out on grass eating, and that's good for Gracie because she don't have to feed near as much, correct?
That is good, yes. And you.
It's really great for me. There's no question about that. But here we are back, and we missed you last week. We were on our annual pheasant hunt up at Winter, South Dakota, and got to spend some time with the boys and friends, and first time for Gracie's husband, Ben, to go along with us, and we had an absolute fantastic time. I think it's been, never have I spent as much time with my son-in-law Ben as I got to now, and you know, we had a great time, and you know, I kind of missed the boys hadn't went for 2 and 3 years respectively, so they kind of got their kids a little bit in a different stage, so we all got to go up and have an absolute great time. And we had a great group of hunters with us, and 2 of those are with us here today, not only to talk about the hunt, but Frank and Frank Jr. Neeson from Neeson and Neeson in St. Louis law firm, and Frank has been here before. Well, Frankie's been here to eat before, but I think the first time you probably did radio with us. So
it is, Charlie.
Welcome aboard, and Frank. I tell you, we just talked briefly. What a great group of guys that we get to hunt with and have collaboration with and enjoy each and every year.
We look forward to it every year, and the guys who do hunt are you know, they're A-class people, and we've got good dogs too, so that helps. And this year we ran into a blizzard going up there, so the hunting was a little rough the first couple days, but it got better. And it was a joy tromping around with everybody and getting the birds up and getting some shots in.
And, you know, Frank has had some shoulder surgery here in the last few days, and but you know, it looks like you'll be in shooting shape again for next year without a doubt.
Yeah, I put my left rotator cuff surgery off until after the pheasant hunt, but last Friday I got it done, so I've got a not a cast but a sling on, and I'm going to have that on for about 6 weeks. But my prognosis is good, and I'm looking forward to being able to get back to exercising and get back to hunting and doing outdoor things.
And you know, I'll have to say that you know, if you need a law firm, this father, and actually there's another son, that's a partner, I guess a partner.
Mark Neeson, I'm actually Frank Neeson Jr., and my son here is Frank Neeson III, who's by me, but we have another couple of lawyers. We have Mark Neeson and Michael McDonough. I mean, we've been practicing together for quite a while, and
35 years I read on. I don't know if you've been there, but your firm's been there for 34 or 5 years.
Yeah, we've been doing this for quite a while, and I initially started out with a firm called Thomas, Bussey, Goodwin, Cullen, Clooney, and Gibbons, and then broke off in 1985 with another lawyer, and then in 1987 by myself, and eventually Mike McDonough and my son Frank came into the practice, and then my son Mark came into the practice, and we're we're full-time every day, and the COVID never stopped us, and we were in the office every day, even during that in St. Louis.
Just out of, you said Gibbons, would that be the Senator Gibbons or no?
No, that wasn't,
Okay.
that Gibbons was not Senator Gibbons. All the people that I named there, they're all gone and past now, but that was the initial firm I went with, and that was back in 1977, so that's quite a ways ago.
And you all do a multitude of things at your firm.
We do a lot of different things, that's true. The bread and butter of the firm is doing plaintiffs' personal injury, workers' compensation, Social Security disability work. But yeah, do we do divorces? Do we do probate work for people? You know, do we do traffic and DWIs and things like that? You bet we do. And we also do some other things. If people have a specialized need and they come in and they find that they've either been sued or they need to do a collection because somebody won't pay them that should have paid them, those things are all available, and we are capable of traveling all around Missouri and into Illinois. Two of our lawyers have Illinois licenses and go over to Illinois frequently.
You know, and that, you know, it's a big area, and not a whole lot of firms right downtown St. Louis I don't know of, you know what I'm saying? Of course, I don't know, you know, your particular, you know, backyard either. I know that Clayton has several of them, but downtown St. Louis, you're right down there in the midst of things.
Well, the advantage of being downtown has always been that we're close to a lot of the courts and the agencies. We're close to the city circuit court, of course, and we're close to the federal district court and the federal court of appeals. We're also close to the municipal courts for the city of St. Louis. And, you know, the Division of Workers' Compensation has its office about 2 blocks away from us. So we've got those covered. Now, it's not a far distance to go to Clayton if we have to cover that, or St. Charles if we have to cover something there. We just shoot out Interstate 70. And as far as Hillsborough goes for Jefferson County, well, that's not too distant either. We just go down 55 and swing over at Highway Z.
Well, and I don't know this, but East St. Louis in Illinois, is there a court?
Yeah, there's actually a federal courthouse in East St. Louis, Illinois that has a lot of litigation that goes on there, and there's a lot of criminal litigation if you're
right.
that happens. But yeah, there's a courthouse in East St. Louis, and it is right smack dab in the middle of East St. Louis, and it is well guarded, well protected, and when you're there, you are safe.
You know, that's always an important thing to go, you know, over there. But, you know, East St. Louis has not had a good reputation in regard to safety for a period of time. I remember when I was a kid, you know, I was under 18, taking hogs over to East St. Louis, and, you know, got lost with a truck a couple of times, and I just wasn't too sure of, not to, you know, degrade them at all, but it was a, you know, it is a situation that hopefully sooner or later will get rectified, you know, and
Sure.
make it safe everywhere.
Sure, they have a wonderful courthouse too. I mean, their federal courthouse will rival any you've ever been in. It's been upgraded and repaired, and it was opened, I think, originally when Grover Cleveland was president, but it's been rehabbed.
Wow.
and just looks super, and it actually, technologically, it has all the technological advancements you'd want for electronics, and when you have a trial needing to stage things with your exhibits and what have you, it's really quite a marvel.
Frankie, just as a whole, is there a lot of difference, you know, the bigger picture between, in your specialties, between Missouri law and Illinois law on you know, let's just say workers' comp, or, you know, Social Security is a federal thing, correct? For the most part?
Yes. Go ahead. There are differences, Charlie. I mean, with workers' compensation, just generally, one of the main differences is they take the chart of a human person, and the whole person in Missouri is worth 400 weeks of compensation, which is calculated a little bit different than Illinois. But in Illinois, the whole person.
That'd be 8 years, correct? I mean, you know what I'm saying, or something like that.
Yeah, and in Illinois, it's a 500-week person. So depending on the type of injury that you have, sometimes you can have elections as to where you have your accident and where you can bring your claim and that sort of thing. But that's one of the main differences. There's some other technical differences that I don't know if I could
It's all right.
get into on the radio here.
I think that the biggest difference between Illinois and Missouri is in Illinois, if you have a work injury, you have the right as the employee to choose your own doctor and have workers' compensation pay for it. In Missouri, that the employer and its insurer have the opportunity to assign you a doctor, and you can go to your own doctor, but they're not going to pay for it.
Well, that's a pretty huge difference, you know, when it comes to those, you know, kind of things. But, you know, every businessman and every employee, I mean, we are all exposed to workers' comp issues, and we all pay, you know, to some degree to have, you know, some kind of insurance, you know what I'm saying, to cover those particular things. And it's absolutely real, and every business and a lot of families have been, at least short-term, been incumbent by a workers' comp claim.
Correct. If you have the minimum number of employees, in Missouri it's 5, it's mandatory that you carry workers' compensation insurance, or you're subject to a pretty hefty penalty if you don't. Under that, most of the time you do not need workers' compensation, but then again, just there are many subterfuges that people try to set up to avoid it, and I'd say that most of the time those end up not working when push comes to shove.
And those rates are, you know, are they set by the state, or are they set by the insurance, or is it a multitude of those?
It's both of those things. Your whatever kind of job you have. I mean, clearly, if you have somebody doing secretarial, their opportunity to be injured is much less on an actuarial basis than, say,
running a tractor,
running a tractor,
working in a vineyard,
or working in a vineyard, or any number of hard labor jobs.
And those rates are set in regard to that. And I know I don't get into that. It's Karen's, and now I hope Gracie's job to figure those things out. But you know, we're all involved in that particular process, and you know, it's an important part of worker safety. You know, it's an important part of, you know, the insurance that is covered and paid for, and really regulated by the state. You know, for the most part, it needs to be done. But you know, I want to get into an area here that kind of, you know, is intriguing to me because, you know, you do Social Security, and I guess I'm of that age, you know, to think about that. But, you know, an awful lot of my, you know, my friends and cohorts are in that particular age group. And the thing that I want to kind of focus in on is that, you know, since COVID, we have seen an awful lot of people make the decision not to go back to work. You know, a lot of people my age, you know, or whatever, because I don't know if it's a shot of reality, you know, kind of thinking that, you know, we've lost friends or neighbors because of COVID, and it just ain't worth the effort, or what it is. But there's a lot of my generation that are retiring, and as I look ahead, a phenomenal amount, you know what I'm saying, of people are going to be retiring also. And in that context, okay, I read that there's going to be $30 trillion worth of wealth transfer between now and 2028, basically 6 years or 7 years or whatever. That's as much as our debt. You know, that's like $280-some thousand a person that's going to be transferred. And here's the crux of that, okay? I think an awful lot of estate planning, you know what I'm saying, and trust, and those wills and things have been designed and taken care of by the mail, not in my situation, but, you know, set up around the mail to do that. But my fear is this, that there's an awful lot of women, okay, that's going to be having a large amount of money, you know what I'm saying, that, you know, generational money, you know, that is going to be coming their way and empowering them, you know what I'm saying, to have a vision or a plan in order to take care of that. And Social Security and trust and wills are a big part of that. How can we focus in on that? You know what I'm saying? And how can we look at getting these women, you know, that probably a lot of them have never looked at those nuances. We need to help them, you know what I'm saying? We need to collectively look at what their Social Security benefits are going to be, and I bet most of them don't even know.
Actually, Charlie, let me talk a little bit about that. That you can find out typically through the Social Security Administration. If you go online, you're able to find out all of that stuff if you create an account and just spend a little bit of time taking a look at that. You can figure out what you're going to receive from Social Security depending on when you elect to take that. Many people wait as long as they can. Some people take it as quickly as they can, and there are different financial reasons for that. But with respect,
do you have a particular strategy in regard to people that come to you and say, should I take it at 62? Should I take it, you know, at 65? I mean, we you know, the matrix and the numbers are there, but how do you make judgments in regard to that basic decision on when do I need to do this?
well, we're not financial planners.
I know that.
But yeah, if people ask us, we certainly can evaluate that and say, well, okay, here's what the life tables say as to how long you're going to live and how much money you would make. And then you also have to consider, well, is that person still working, or is there another form of income that they have? Maybe it makes sense for them to take it early just so that they have that extra security to pay for whatever bills that they have. And also, you know, they have another form of income that supports them, and they can do that for a while. Or if they're in a kind of a physical heavy labor job they're not going to be able to do into their late 60s and 70s, that you might want to wait a little bit longer so you can maximize that. There are a lot of different factors that go into that. But again, to touch a little bit more on what you started off talking about with planning for death, I mean, no one likes to think about that. And unfortunately, I handle most of the probate matters at our firm, and the main problem that I see is that people haven't planned ahead, and then I have to kind of clean up the mess, if you will, at the end, and figure out, okay, well, you didn't have a will, so we have to go this way, and it causes a lot of problems, and people don't like to think about their own demise. Most people don't. And it doesn't typically cross my mind, but if I didn't do this as much as I do, I might not have a will myself, but knowing what I know and having dealt with the things that I have for these folks that don't have an estate plan and some horrible accident happens, you have an appreciation for planning ahead. And when you do that, it doesn't typically cost a whole lot of money to plan ahead, but it costs a whole lot of money to clean it up if you haven't planned ahead.
Yeah, and that is so key. And going back to the point, you know, about not anyone wanting to think about their mortality, you know, is one of the issues here. But I will also say that, you know, the older I get, making those decisions of what am I going to do with my assets is a very, very stressful, you know, thing. And it's a thing that moves. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of a thing that moves on family, you know, depending on their interest, depending on, you know, their spouses, depending upon their children. So it is less than an easy thing to sit down and say, Gracie's going to get part of our wine inventory. Well, Mom's going to get it all, but...
She's sitting right next to you. Be careful.
But it is not an easy task, and I don't know analytically how to address some of that. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
There are a variety of means that you can use to do that. Living trust sometimes can take care of that. There's not, at the current time, a tax consequence to setting up a revocable living trust, but the beauty of it is that things come together as seamlessly as they can after death to distribute to the people that you've designated in the living trust. Are there some things that you have to respect when you have a living trust? Yeah, you have to respect the trust and you have to make those transactions that way. But under normal circumstances, if you don't like it, you can revoke it later on, and it only becomes a permanent trust after death. Is there a tax advantage to it? It's not particularly tax advantageous, but it is advantageous at getting things distributed. As far as taxes go, under the law where we exist right now, there's a rather liberal exemption from estate tax. So unless you have a whole lot of money.
Is it 12 million or something?
I think it's 10, 12 million.
Whatever that is, I don't know.
I
don't have to worry about that.
You don't have to worry about the estate tax, but that is being spoken about in Congress now, and that may be lessened substantially. There are also some things that could affect states that are being talked about in Congress very seriously, and one is the stepped-up basis. By stepped-up basis, from generation to generation, even if you do have a state tax, you end up with a basis in the property that's the basis upon date of death of the person who owned it. So if you had something worth $10 when you bought it, and when the person inherited it, it was on your death, it's worth $100. That $90 you never have to pay tax on. That's the basis upon which you can have it. So if you sell it, a year later for $120, instead of paying 120 minus 10 or $90 on it, you would end up paying $20, which is taking $100, which is what it was worth at the time of death, and just adding the $20 to it, and that's what you'd pay taxes on. And if that's eliminated, and I know there's some talk about eliminating it to the extent that it's a taxable event on death, that would mean that many, many things would be taxed immediately at probably at capital gains rates, but still substantially.
What is that, 30? I don't know.
And you could end up with a number of smaller businesses, farms, things like this, would be unable to pay this tax, and the end result is that they would probably have to be sold or partially sold. So that is something that's out there, and it's something that hasn't changed, and Congress hasn't changed it yet, but there's certainly a push on to have that done. And I think some of the provisions of the Buy Back Better bill that's sitting in the Senate right now would do some of that. So you got to be very careful with that. And there are limitations on gifts, as you know. I mean, you can give anybody you want. It's like $13,000 every year without having to worry about an estate tax problem later on. But if you need to start giving it away and you've got it, you and your spouse can give things away in that fashion, and over 5-6 years you can give away a substantial amount of money without ever having to worry about there being an estate tax consequence to it.
Frank, there's a whole lot here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is, you've just indicated a lifetime of studying, these issues, but for most people, even talking about a trust, you know what I'm saying, and what a trust is or what it does. I mean, I'm to the point where, a trust keeps it out of probate, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It allows me basically, conceptually, to keep it out of court, which, I respect in what all of you do, but, if you're going to keep it out of court, you're going to cheapen, your cost of transferring these assets, period.
The privacy that you'd want, because the things that go through probate, you have to file a public inventory with the probate division of the circuit court in Missouri, and that exposes to everyone just what the heck you've got that's going through probate, and they then know what you're worth, and a lot of people don't like that. And
if anybody, thought they had a, that you owed them something, or, long lost relatives, in all honesty, I don't know how this would be, but I guarantee you, in Gascony County, Missouri, there's an awful lot of land, that has been transferred without absolute certainty, to some of that ownership.
And if you do it the wrong way, you can end up having the same basis that your great-grandfather had back when it was $30 an acre or something. So you have to make sure you do this right, or you don't get the stepped-up basis. And that can be a very scary thing to have your tax advisor tell you that you are going to owe capital gains tax on the price that your great-grandfather paid for a piece of property.
The difference, Frankie, between a will and a trust is what?
Well, a trust is typically you create that, for while you're alive. You would transfer assets into the trust, real estate, personal property, things of that nature, accounts, and anything you really wanted to. And that seems to be, in my experience, the most difficult part for people to do is to transfer the actual assets themselves into the trust. It's not that hard to do. It's
because there's an administrator of that trust, correct?
Yes, the trustee would typically, usually there's one, but sometimes there are multiple trustees that would administer the trust, and that's, it basically puts all the assets into a trust that can transfer after death without too much involvement. A will basically is different because it transfers your assets, or tells a court essentially who you want to handle your affairs, so your personal representative, executor of the will, who's in charge of transferring that. So sometimes you'd have to pick among, in your example, your 3 kids or something like that, who's going to handle those things. It tells a court how you want your assets distributed to your heirs or whoever you want, really. Now, if you're married, typically it's difficult to disinherit your spouse, so you have to be careful about that. But Gracie, you can disinherit your kids though without too much trouble. As long as you have your wits about you, you can disinherit your children. And I've dealt with some things where that there has been a falling out among family members where it's just I don't want to give my son or my daughter or whoever any part of my estate because we don't get along and they haven't done things that I've liked in their life and things like. But you can do it, and that's one of the big differences. Many times you can do some estate planning to where a will is sort of a catch-all. There are other things that you can use. There's some things called beneficiary deeds that can be utilized to transfer real property from, say, you and your wife to your kids without doing much more than recording a deed that says, here's who I want to have this real estate when we are both gone. And those are pretty simple things that can avoid probate, and they're relatively inexpensive as opposed to going to probate court.
And you also get the stepped-up basis.
And you get the stepped-up basis with that too, yeah.
And that's, these are unbelievable, significant issues that most people, a lot of people, especially out here in the rural areas, have avoided. And we all think that everything is, all the great intentions, and they are great intentions in regard to family. There's no question about it all. But when it comes, and you guys see it firsthand every day, when the time comes to divide those assets, when there is no direction in regard to that, there is, even in the closest of families, there is hard feelings, that come along with that, and continual litigation, and I've got two boys here, you know what I'm saying? In my example, Woody is, not here very much at the triplets.
He's got a lot of responsibilities.
But, Gussie is here, even though I don't catch him very often, but he does, 80%, well, Gracie does 80%. Gussie, she helps me on the farm a lot, but, as far as farming, what I'm saying, and those assets, the court's going to look at that, what I'm saying, probably whatever, third, and unless you got somebody articulating the work and the investment, what I'm saying, and time that's been put in, everybody might get treated equally or not equally, and then you throw in this bag, what I'm saying, other family members and other grandkids, it gets nutty, don't it?
It can, yeah. And there, under the law, there are, if you don't have a will and you haven't done any estate planning at all, and I'm dealing with one of these cases right now, where kind of a younger guy passed away, no wife, no kids. He's got parents and a sibling, I think. There are laws in Missouri, and I think in every state, of intestate succession, and by that I mean if you die intestate, that means without a will that has said, here's where I want my assets to, how I want them to be distributed. The law says how things get divided up based on your marital status, how many kids you have, whether those kids are by your spouse or not, all those things. And you don't want that because you have to go to court, and it takes a little while, and it can be expensive, and you want to avoid that. But I've had to familiarize myself very well with those particular laws, because it does come up where people come and say, oh, I've got, my wife died, my brother died, didn't have a will, didn't really make any plans for that, so then you have to find out what assets are there, file an action in the probate court, and then figure out, how everything gets divided up under the law.
Yeah, and, we like to think that there is equal justice under the law, and there is to some degree, only when full knowledge, of the circumstances can be brought forward for judgment to be made. But that's the problem, in a non-will situation, in a non-trust situation. The nuances, of those details are always cloudy, and, that's why it's important. I mean, tremendously important for people to have at least some idea of what, what they want to do. And a trust allows you, in my knowledge, a little more flexibility, you know what I'm saying, and how you approach this upcoming date. If I don't know exactly what I want to do when I sit down today and make out a will, and I say, this asset goes to this person, this asset goes to those person, and I want to see what the future is going to bring. You know what I'm saying? How many kids is Gracie going to have? Does her daughter want to work here? You know what I'm saying? Does she want to be part of it? All of those particular things. A trust allows you some flexibility, if you're lucky enough, you know what I'm saying, to live long, to make some other decisions on that as time goes on.
And so far we've spoken about things where it's kind of a unitary family where everybody's on board, it's the same marriage, etc. But in America nowadays, blended families are certainly maybe more the norm than the typical unitary family, if you want to call it that. And you have many times there are children born out of wedlock, and they, under our U.S. Constitution, they can't be disinherited without an affirmative act. So you've got children who are born out of wedlock, you've got children born to wife number one, you got children born to husband number two, And if you are able to at least get a trust together that assigns what you want to do with this, it certainly makes for, as you put it, a more just thing to happen than, say, they die without a will and all of a sudden these kids who may be stepkids but who contributed a lot to the family receive nothing. And that's the reality of it. So the more planning you have with this and the more you take into account what your own situation is, the happier the future generation is going to be.
You've taken notes on all this, Grace. Switching just a little bit back to or on to Social Security. What would be a typical Social Security case that you would take? For us,
it's mainly Social Security disability. You see, every time your employer pays into Social Security, a certain important part of that is paid as a premium toward an account for Social Security disability. So Social Security disability is not welfare. You paid for it. But the idea is that if you fit the regulations for Social Security and you're under retirement age and you're disabled and you're not working, you may qualify for a monthly pension, if you will, under Social Security disability. And there are lots and lots of rules about this, and one doesn't coordinate with the other. In other words, you may be, for Social Security purposes, considered to be totally disabled and receiving a check, yet for workers' compensation purposes, you may not be. They may say you can do whatever you want. They don't. These two kinds of institutions don't talk to one another, and they come to different conclusions many times. In Social Security, for instance, if you're unable to do what they call substantial gainful activity, that's one of the tests that they use to determine that you can get this monthly stipend. Now, you can also work part-time, though, under Social Security disability, make up to, I think it's like $1,100 a month, and still be entitled to that benefit. There are also some other kind of strange nuances about Social Security disability. For instance, there are a lot of regulations, and if you aren't working and you have X, Y, and Z medically happen to you, that's all they need. They can pay you disability, and that's called meeting a listing. And some people are able to do that. Another one of the things that they have is the older you are, the more likely it is that you're going to receive disability, because the presumption is after you reach the age of 50, you can't learn anything new, no matter how smart you are. So, consequently...
That's not true, Grace.
That's a presumption that they have in the regulations. And so, and another thing is based on your height and weight, things that you can pick up, they assume that you can pick up so much. So in that respect, because generally speaking, women are smaller and can lift less just because of their frame and the way they're made, they have kind of an automatic advantage to getting Social Security disability. And we've talked about these things for many years. They don't seem to be changed much. Social Security has additional regulations regarding things such as mental injuries, which you don't think about a lot. Most people think, well, my back is broken and I had to have a fusion, and I had to have my arm done, this and that. Many times people become depressed or something else, or they're schizophrenic, and that plays into whether or not they're able to draw a Social Security disability. And if they're depressed enough, they end up having what they call a payee representative appointed to spend their money for them, and that's yet another wrinkle in it. It becomes fairly complicated. And Social Security, I think, does a pretty decent job of protecting the people that get the money. They don't let the lawyers go crazy with the fees. The lawyers' fees are capped at a certain amount. And they watch out for this payee representative business. And when you finally do get to retirement age, they take you out of the account that's for Social Security disability, and they put you into the account that's for Social Security retirement. It won't make any difference to you. You're still going to get the same amount of money going into your check, but that's how they do it.
It's a different account,
Yeah,
you know,
different
that,
account that they keep.
that is, I'm not going to say they're both planned expenditures from the federal government because we both, I mean, there's not a lockbox with this going in.
Things will have to be changed, or eventually both these funds, both for retirement and disability, will go out of business because there just aren't enough workers out there contributing to the fund. So somewhere there has to be revenue created to keep people being paid, or I forget what it is, but I think within the next 10 years you're looking at insolvency unless something changes.
We're just gonna print a whole lot more money, and you know what I'm saying, take care of that. Okay, in your situation where your shoulder, your rotary cuff, I mean, just out of speculate, or let's say that you was working out here, you know what I'm saying, and you was a vineyard clipper or something, and you had to have a particular surgery, would you be qualified for disability? You know what I'm saying? If you could prove...
There are different forms of workers' compensation disability. The first one is what they call temporary total disability. That means you got hurt. For the current time, you're not able to work. And while you're recovering, they're supposed to pay you 2/3 of your average weekly wage. There's a cap on it, and the cap's about $1,000 a week. But 2/3 of your average weekly wage up to the top of the cap. The second kind of disability, there's something called temporary partial disability that isn't paid often, but yet exists. And that would be, let's say you're making $20 an hour, and because you're injured, you can only do work that's $15 an hour. That $5 an hour difference while you're still under treatment getting well, 2/3 of that would be paid to you in the form of temporary partial disability for workers' compensation, or should be. The third kind of thing, and this is where what we see most often, is the doctor sees you, you've had your surgery, you're as well as you're going to be, and you're able to go back to some kind of work, but you're still not the same. Maybe you can't, your range of motion in your arm, if you've got a rotator cuff tear or something, isn't what it was. Well, then you're entitled to something called permanent partial disability. In other words, disability that's permanent in nature but partial in degree. And by partial, they mean you can still work. And in the case of like a rotator cuff tear, I would say those things around the state would go from a low of like 17.5% disability to the shoulder all the way up to 35 or 40% disability to the shoulder. Maybe more if you had a really, really bad one. And then the final kind of disability you can get from workers' compensation, and this is the kind of the ultimate disability, is something called permanent total disability, which means that because of your injury, or because of your injury together with some other problems you had before, you're unable to compete in what they call the open labor market. And if you're not able to do that, then either the insurance company or another entity called the Second Injury Fund, which I'm not going to get into right now because that's an animal in itself, would have to pay you 2/3 of your average weekly wage up to a maximum for the rest of your natural life. And
is that on a lump sum kind of thing or something?
well, there are times you can ask the Labor Commission to commute it to a lump sum, but most people draw it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And under current law, it is tax-free, so it's got a little more to it than, say, wages that are subject to all of our income taxes and city earnings taxes, things like that.
Wow. Are you overwhelmed with all of, you're taking notes though, right? You know, I mean, you're the one that you're the one that handles all of this, and for an employer, absolutely important. I know that if you've got a claim, Grace, or we have a claim, that documentation starts immediately. Am I correct there?
Yeah, you're supposed to report it right away to the Division of Workers' Compensation and to your insurance company. Actually, if you report to your insurance company, they'll make the filing for you, and make sure your employee is sent to the appropriate doctor. Usually the insurance company will suggest to you who that should be, and get them well, because you want them to get back to work, you want them to be well, you want them to be happy employees, and the more you dunce around with them, the less likely they're going to be happy employees, and then your employee will end up separated from you, and you don't want that most of the time.
And we talk, a lot about not a lot, because we don't have very much unemployment here. A few instances, that things occurred, but, this employee file, and documenting, what I'm saying, what occurs, in this particular situation, especially if, you have a grievance with your employee, and then a couple of weeks, that needs to be documented, you know what I'm saying, and then maybe a couple of weeks later, you know what I'm saying, they mopping the floor or something and slip. These things need to be, put in the file and checked, so you have, when it's in that file and when there's a written record of what's going on, isn't it easier for you to defend the employer? No.
To defend the employer? Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's easy to get your coverage then, and this is for your benefit as well as the employer.
Of course it is.
And so if there's a slip and fall and you reported it, you're in good shape, because unless you have something strange happen with your insurance company, like you didn't pay their premium, they're going to cover you, and you basically will put it in their hands, and they'll see it through to conclusion.
A lot, Frankie, a whole lot here that a lot of law books get written, but, when, from a practical standpoint, put a plan together in regard to where you are, how you want to keep this out of the court system, however those particular things might be, because that's not cheap for anybody. I mean, court cost alone got to be reasonably expensive, but do some planning in regard to what you want to do with your estate. There's a lot of options here, and even in the trust side of things, there's a whole litany of different trusts that you can put up, right? Like an irrevocable,
Yep.
and
Irrevocable trust, that's paid.
what does that mean? I read that.
Means you establish the trust, you establish it now, you can't revoke it, so the money belongs to whoever the trustee is, and the trustee administers the trust for the beneficiaries. And that trust will generally go on until there's a satisfaction of what the purpose of the trust is. There's a rule against perpetuity, so it can't go on forever, but it can go on for a pretty long time if you set it up properly.
Who would be the typical trustee? Does most time attorneys play that role? Do you play that role?
No, not usually. They have most of the banks, and I'll bet your local bank here has a trust department, and they can act as trustee for an irrevocable trust, and people use them. They're very conservative in their investments, though, and you'll find, some people find after a while that, well, where they should have been making money, the bank has me invested in something that's paying, under 1% interest, and
Right.
they chafe at that, but that's considered conservative investing.
Keeping hold of the principal, in other
Keeping a
words.
hold of the principle for sure. And yeah, people establish these things for the benefit of their children. Maybe they have one child that's kind of a wild child, and they want to keep the money out of their hands till they turn 45 or something, and they can establish an irrevocable trust.
I didn't say a word, guys. Okay, that's irrevocable trust. But in a typical situation, if you put a trust together, who would be the administrator, or the trustee?
If you have one of these living trusts that's revocable, in other words, you can revoke
Right.
anytime, and it really doesn't have a tax consequence to it because the income from that living trust is attributed to you. Many times the people who establish it are the trustees, and on their death they'll designate their spouse or somebody else to be the trustee, and
Or one of the kids, possibly, or an
one of the
attorney.
kids. And a lot of times that's kind of the end of it, because on the death of the second of the couple, if there are two of them, and husband and wife involved, it's usually, let's distribute it to these children and grandchildren as follows, 25% to this one, 20% to that one, and so they just have to wind up the affairs and do it, make sure the tax returns are filed for any income that's generated in the interim between when they get it and when it's distributed, and it's over. And it's kind of a neat instrument if you've got the right
Element and the right handler.
And the right handler and people that you trust, yes.
So, in our particular situation where you've got, several different assets, a winery and some land and, some cattle and yada, 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 and you owe money on it. You owe the banks, you owe, anyway, you could, simply put, as confusing as it sounds, you could put all of those assets in a trust.
Yep.
Karen and I could continue to manage them however we see fit.
Yes.
Within the limitations of whatever those regulations are. We could go ahead and buy more cows, You could leverage, whatever you needed to do. You could add to the land. You could sell part of your land.
Yeah.
You could do anything with those assets that you desired to do, and live just as you are, but if something would happen to either one of you, the other one would have more than likely. Those abilities to do that, and you could go on, but you could keep all of this stuff out of the court system and keep it within the confines of who you wanted to handle it.
Yep. That's pretty
That's it?
succinct, but that's how you can do it.
That's
you certainly
it.
can.
Say what?
That's it.
That's it. Is that what we want to do? No, it is, and this ain't all. This I didn't want to drive you guys out just for my benefit. You know what I'm saying? But it is tremendously important. To have these things and give thoughts and consideration to it. And if you got a lot of different moving parts, the way it appears to me. That a trust is something that you want to take and sit down and think about an awful lot.
Yes, I think that's a serious thing to consider if you have assets and you want to see them divided the way you want them divided without having to report your assets to the probate division of the circuit court. Yeah.
Well, we have covered an awful lot of ground today, and I want to give them a way to get a hold of you. First of all, any people that know me know that they can call Gracie, you know what I'm saying here, and she'll get you there or whatever. But I know you got a website, I know you got phone numbers, and we're going to give them now, and then right before we sign off, we will also give them. So how do they get a hold of you? What's the best method of contacting you?
What's our email, Frank?
Well, we have a couple emails, but the general firm email is Niesen, that's Niesen, at Niesen, and then a hyphen, dash, law, law.com, or you can reach me directly at Frank, and then the digit 3, at Niesen-law.com. Our phone number is 314, I forgot our phone number, 421-5800, and
that's your hard number.
That's our hard line number. We've got people there from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and many Saturdays from about 9 to noon. We're there.
Or if they just go to Google and put on.
They tell you go.
I don't think I spread Niesen exactly right, but you come up anyway.
Yeah.
It's not like the vehicle, or is it?
No, it is not.
No.
They're not Japanese. That's the other Niesen. They're doing a lot better than we are.
Oh, golly, Well, I appreciate all the time that, we spend, and thank you for being here. Enjoy your family, enjoy the Christmas, coming up here. I appreciate you, trotting out here when we're not shooting birds or, eating Sunday dinner or whatever. I appreciate you and your family, and I just want people to know that, when you guys are hunting, you know, you are hunting, and you work incredibly hard, you know, and that's amazing to me, you know, that you are as thorough as you are in regard and so disciplined and structured. You know, that's what makes you good attorneys too. Attention to detail and having that tenacity, you know, to go through the snow and whatever it takes, you know, go through the storm and come out for your clients. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and I'd like to wish Merry Christmas to everyone in the audience, and hope they have a happy, healthy, and particularly a safe one. And, you know, we'll be into the new year shortly, and we'll see what 2022 brings.
Exactly. Grace, you have anything to say? We got any New Year's? I know I've got some calls. Do we have any New Year's slots open yet? Or
We do. We have early times and later, so 5
Okay.
and 5:30, and then 8 and 8:30 are still available.
So help me with the schedule this weekend. I mean, we don't do...
We are closed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this weekend.
We are?
We are.
Who's paying your bill? Who's paying your salary this weekend?
You are.
Okay, so we are closed Christmas Eve, Christmas Day,
And the 26th.
and the 26th. Okay, but we're open for New Year's, and I know we got, you know, Christmas parties going on now, and even after Christmas, we've got, you know, some parties, and it's not too late if somebody wants to book a party. And we go through January a lot of times still doing Christmas parties for companies, because guess what? It's almost impossible, you know, between Thanksgiving and New Year's to get in another Christmas party for a lot. So, Merry Christmas. God bless you all. Let's see, next week is,
We will not be here next week.
I guess you heard it from the boss. So, I'm working on something that you all might not want to take home with you, but I'm going to do some predictions the next time we're together. I'm going to write down some predictions of what I think is going to happen this next year. Aren't you interested in that?
I am very interested.
Frank, Charlie,
Always a pleasure.
Frank, God bless you. Thank you to your wives and kids. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and especially to you. Spend time with your family, or go hunting. Whatever you want to do. We'll see you in a couple weeks.